trigger for accessing concessional funding. And this is without prejudice to preserving what is there for the IDA countries. We're not trying to take away from them, but there are a number of middle-income countries that really do need assistance if they're to adapt to the new realities of a climate crisis. My fear is that given that we know, according to them, that you need about $300 billion a year to cover loss and damage, unless we have an urgent set of decision-making, we're going to suffer what every parent suffers from, exciting expectations and being unable to deliver them. And we all know what happens when children face that reality. And the global population, I suspect, is going to be the same way. So that we really have to have, in my view, an urgent convening of the entities that can help bridge that gap.
Now let's move over to the market. Last week, the local bus concluded on a bullish note, saying in the weekly uptick of 27 basis points, as the all-share index closed to 71,419.87 points, bringing the year-to-date gain to 38.42%, while the overall market capitalization settled at 39 trillion naira. Market breadth witnessed about 53 losers and 32 winners. The top traded in terms of volume were Universal Insurance, Access Corp, and Transcorp, while the top traded in terms of value were GTCO, Dangote Cement, and Access Corp. Meanwhile, the money market interbank rate saw a decrease last week due to improved liquidity in the financial system resulting from FAC inflow. States shared 906 billion naira for October. That's the federal government, states and local government shared 906 billion naira in October. Now, if we take a look at the OBB, we saw a significant drop in the OBB rate and the overnight rates to close at 15.75% and 16.32% respectively, while the Treasury bills market exhibited a bullish trend last week, driven by the absence of OMO auctions despite a tight interbank liquidity. The Treasury bills market saw a decline, ending the week at 10.19%. Now, let's move over to the foreign markets, where U.S. stock futures fell overnight on Sunday, trading after the S&P 500 reached a new high following a 5-week winning streak. For European markets this morning, we saw that they opened mixed, putting a pause to significant global rally as traders bet on interest rate cuts from major central banks in 2024. While Asian Pacific markets were also mixed overnight, with investors awaiting a slew of key economic data on Tuesday and inflation readings this week. For oil, we saw prices high as geopolitical tensions in the Middle East returned to focus, spurring concerns about supply from the region, and as global fuel demand growth clouded the sector's outlook. Brent climbed to about $79.61 earlier today, while gold prices are hitting a new record this Monday for a second day in a row, with spot prices touching as much as $2,100 as the global rush for the bullion appears set to continue. All right, let's quickly take a break, and when we return, we will be adding our voice to the conversation on President Tinubu's trip to COP28 in Dubai. Let's try as much as possible to count the cost. The cost of going. Are we going to get value for money? We'll be talking about that when we return from the break. Do join us again, but don't forget to join us on all our social media platforms. We'll be right back.
Government should not be a first-level primary complaint resolution mechanism. Indeed, what that means is that you've made the FCCPC a multi-company customer service desk. And if that is what is happening, it means that the companies have outsourced some of their operations to the government. And the government is subsidizing their businesses, at least with respect to resolution of complaints. And so the real mechanism that would work is for each company to resolve complaints. And we must get there. The companies are foot dragging on setting up independent standalone complaint resolution mechanisms, but it's the only place to go. Even if you asked NCC to resolve telco disputes or dissatisfaction, just think about the sheer number of telecommunications companies NCC would have to deal with. If you had NCA do that, see the sheer number of airlines. But each airline, each telco, each disco can resolve what is really their business. So just imagine now when you say an FCCPC that resolves all.
Kelvin Emmanuel, the Chief Executive Officer at Dairy Hills, is joining me right now. We're taking a look at President Tinubu's trip to COP28 summit in Dubai. Hello, Kelvin. How are you?
Good morning.
Good morning. Let's get started. Social media and, in fact, the whole country has been agog with people are not happy this time. Not too pleasant stories around the presidency in terms of the number of delegates that went to COP28. Are you part of the uproar?
First of all, I think the president has a very terrible communications team.
Really?
They are not doing a good job at communicating. The president of Kenya, I was told, sent a list of over 100 delegates. Sorry, he was sent a list of over 100 delegates. He asked his people to trim it down, and it came to 51. And even at 51, Kenyans are still angry because the petrol subsidy was removed in Kenya. Petrol subsidy is also removed in Nigeria. And
is it really removed? Anyway, that's a conversation.
That's another conversation.
It, yes.
And the cost of servicing the government to the size of the budget, I think, is over 5 trillion naira. The cost of governance is very high. Nigerians have been asking the presidency to implement the Stephen Orasanye report to reduce the size of government. The government has still not responded. They've done white papers on that report. Over white papers, nothing has been done. Nigerians they've seen increase in the cost of energy, in the cost of food. You know, the amount of money, the percentage of your income that goes into food right now is over 90% for most of the country. And a report came out that at the end of the day, Nigerians have to rely on payday loan to survive. So it's important that the government tightens its belt. The government has said that officially only 138 people are catered for. In my opinion, I don't think that Nigeria needs to send more than 25 people to COP28. Apart from the special envoy, the president, 1 or 2 or 3 key ministers, Minister of Trade and Investment, Minister of Petroleum, the NNPC. Yes, Minister of Environment is very important for COP28 because it has to do with climate change. Minister of Water Resources, and 1 or 2 aides. I don't see the need for them to carry a full retinue of convoy. Moreover,
the issue around
the question we should...
sorry to cut you short. I need to bring this in. How about the issue of the presidential initiative of this compressed natural gas? Of course, the movement from fossil fuels right now to greener fuels.
Look, you can't do CNG without setting up mother and daughter stations.
Among even other things, renewable energy and all of this.
You can't do CNG without setting up mother and daughter stations. In fact, this issue about renewable energy and solar panels and wind turbines, we're having this conversation in Cape Town 2 months ago. And the issue about solar panels are not affordable. More so because of the exchange rate. They are not affordable because the beneficiation for lithium, aluminium, copper, the chips that are used in solar panels, inverter batteries, they are not produced in Nigeria. They're done in Europe, in Western Europe, and in China, mostly. And then you have to import at this exchange rate. How much are you going to land them here? When you need to change batteries, how much are you going to land them here?
I don't even want us to go into that conversation because it's a deep one. We can be here for additional 2 hours talking about that. But let's still stay within the discourse this morning, which is around the cost of President Buhari, President Buhari Sindaura, President Tinubu's delegates, delegation to COP28. So in your own view, they shouldn't have been more than 25.
They shouldn't have been more than 25, because the first question you should ask is, what is even the agenda of Nigeria to COP28? Look, I'll tell you what, China and the US are the biggest polluters globally.
Yeah.
Africa contributes 30% to global emissions. Why is Africa being asked to contribute equally to scaling back when the biggest polluters in the world are the US and China, right? Number two, the petrol that is imported into Nigeria is dirty. SON is not checking. NESRA is not checking. The petrol imported into Nigeria has more than 15 parts per million for sulfur, and it has less than 80 parts per million for octane. It contributes to carbon emissions from cars and generators across Nigeria. So if for the basic thing on checking the sulfur content and the octane in the petrol that is imported into Nigeria is not done, what are we doing at COP28? What is the Nigerian government actually doing at COP28? The carbon emitted from the petrol that is consumed in Nigeria, in fact, to the extent where the European Union recently decided that it will not allow refineries in Belgium, in Netherlands, or any part of Europe to export out of the European Union any petrol that falls below standards that has been set globally. The Nigerian government has refused to take action on that. The European Union is taking action to protect the interests of countries like Nigeria and Africa. So what are we doing in COP28 if we can't address the most basic challenges that we have control over?
Now, the question is about $1 billion, close to $1 billion would have been spent on even flight tickets alone. We're not talking about hotels, we're not talking about feeding and all of that. Do you also give the presidency some slack in terms of their defense, that civil society organizations are part of them, that's their members and all of that? Can Nigeria...
What I see happen,
or this thing is not even defendable.
What I see happen in terms of 1,411 is, look, the UAE government shot visas to Nigerians, and people used it as a racket to get the cover to access visa for the program. I don't think, personally, I don't think the government is paying for 1,411 persons to go to Dubai for COP28. I don't think so. I think the numbers are way less.
But the list came up.
No, the question is...
But that's the Nigeria delegation.
The Nigerian delegation, right? The Nigerian government did not pay for 1,411 people. But even at 138, assuming that that's the number they paid for, in my opinion, is still too much. You don't need more than 25 people to COP28. Because in my view, the Nigerian government does not have its own house in order. The most basic thing for carbon emission in Nigeria, we're not focusing on it. We have issues about gas flaring in Niger Delta. We have issues about pollution and vandalization of pipes, bunkering, that is leading to we not reaching our OPEC quota, that is damaging the environment. We have issues about the HREP, hydrocarbon remediation program, that is a contribution, a counterparty fund between international oil companies and the Nigerian government. At the last count, I heard reliably that there were allegations of procurement fraud and the issues of Nigerian government not contributing its own part to the counterparty fund that has been set up to clean up the Niger Delta. These are basic issues that talks about carbon emissions and control. If we're not dealing with the basic issues we have control over, what are we doing in Dubai? What are we doing in Dubai? Why are we not telling the leadership of COP28 and the United Nations that, listen, Africa needs fossil fuels to industrialize, just like the West and the Far East have done, right? And that we cannot talk about energy transition without addressing the fact that, number one, Africa contributes only 30% to global emissions, and Africa must be allowed to industrialize before the West takes it off.
Do you think that African countries have come here with a united voice? Because if you take a look at, let's domesticate it a bit, if you take a look at Nigeria, the ETP, Energy Transition Plan, that was launched by President Buhari, was it last year, 2022, we need about $410 billion to be able to do that between that time to 2060, which we need about $10 billion annually to do that. Do you think that, I asked a question earlier, how should Africa even approach these issues of industrialization? Because like you said, China, Europe, and the rest of the West have industrialized with their different energy sources. Now they are telling Africa, no, we have climate change and all of that. What should be the alternative? How can Africans be smart about putting, their demands forward? That's one. The second thing is that with President Tinubu now at COP28, with what he's doing, what do you think he should bring back home in terms of perhaps green financing, in terms of climate financing, in terms of these are the amount of monies that we'll need, over $400 billion within.
The world needs mums. Providing tasty, nourishing family meals is all that matters.
$4 billion to fund the commercial refinery to refine the crude oil that it will start producing from 2024, right? See, Africa needs to understand that it cannot look to the West for financing of projects.
Really?
It cannot look to the West because Africa needs to use its own resources. Africa needs to stop taking its own money and taking it out of Africa and then expecting the West to finance its own projects. Because the West and the Far East will always use this as a bargaining chip against the continent.
But in what way can Africa...
It's a game of chess.
Yes. In what way can Africa now develop if it uses its own resources? Because I suppose that Africa will use its own resources or sell its own resources, even as it's doing now in its primary state. But what we're saying is that don't even do that in the primary state.
In my suggestion to the Madam PS of the Ugandan government, I said, listen, if a smart way to finance a $4 billion refinery is instead of you to go to the international capital markets or look to reliable partners like the Afro-Exim Bank that was very instrumental in financing the Dangote project. In fact, the first $450 million Alhaji Aliko Dangote got for that refinery came from Afro-Exim Bank. The first $450 million. Instead of you to look that way, why don't you come with a plan and sit down with your operators and say, listen, we're going to ask you to advance us $4 billion and net it off from what they call the joint venture cash calls over a period of years through amortization. That is a smart way to finance that project. And you have calls like this in Namibia because NAMCOR is also going to start, oil production. Namibia has about 3 million people in South Africa, right? So Namibia has the option of either exporting its crude oil, channeling its gas to LNG and channeling some of its natural gas to South Africa.
And they said they don't want to do it the way Nigeria is doing theirs.
You said?
They said they want to do it the way Nigeria has done theirs.
Because Nigeria has not been very
a good example.
Smart. It's not a good example
on the continent.
And I'm surprised that in 2023 of our good Lord that the Nigerian government is talking about getting the Saudi government or Baker Hughes to come and invest in government-owned refineries that, in my opinion, should be stripped down and sold as scraps. How private sector companies to lead the charge for refining crude oil.
Okay, Kelvin, as we end this session, what do you think President Tinubu should bring back? Because he will come back to the agitations and anger, dissatisfaction of Nigerians. Earlier that his media team is not handling this well. What do you think President Tinubu should bring back? Can he be able to convince us this is a country now that is facing hardship, petrol subsidy, we have partial petrol subsidy, food prices have gone up, a whole lot going up, the festive season is coming, a lot of people are very angry, rice is not cheap, and all of that. So a lot of anger in the land.
In Hiroshima early this year, G7, they came out with a communique to keep natural gas as a transition fuel. Mr. President has Nigeria-Morocco gas pipeline. The FID is 25 billion. Nigeria is supposed to contribute 12.5. It doesn't have that money. The president should look for investors to invest in Nigerian-Morocco gas pipeline, NMGP, to start the process of procurement and construction. Engineering design is done, right? So that Nigeria can raise money to fund internal infrastructure for gas pipe. Because, you see, gas is critical and is important. And the more you focus on the upstream, midstream, and downstream infrastructure for gas, the better we'll be able to address the issue of affordability for PMS and diesel. And the better we'll be able to move towards clean energy. Because if you have more on-grid electricity, you have less people using diesel generators. You have less people using petrol generators, right? If you have gas, you'll be able to set up infrastructure for compressed natural gas. If you have pressure metering and reduction system in the southeast, just like you have it in the north central and in the southwest, if you have it in the northeast, you'll be able to have infrastructure that will power gas generators, infrastructure that will power CNG buses and CNG cars across Nigeria.
Okay, I think we'll leave it at that for now, Kelvin. Thank you very much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
And this COP28 is about 12 to 13 days, so they're still in Dubai as we speak. Thank you very much. But I know that everything we're saying, President Tinubu is hearing. His handlers definitely are hearing what Nigerians are saying at this time. Thank you very much and have a good week.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, let's quickly bring you the interview I had with Jude Chiemeka, who is the Executive Director, Capital Markets at the NGX. We had a discussion on Islamic finance. Just take a listen to it. And that's it. In fact, after that interview, that's it for the show. I'll see you all again tomorrow. So be the best you can be and be that change that you want to see. I am Nancy Naji. Speak to my viewers about what Islamic finance is really beyond, of course, it's because let me just say this, because when someone hears Islamic finance, they think it's all about provision of financial products to Muslims. Of course, that's it also according to Sharia law principles and regulations. Can you just speak to my guests about, to my audience, about what Islamic finance is all about? And I also know there are different sectors in Islamic finance, so if you can speak more about that.
All right, thank you so much, Nancy. And once again, thank you so much for having us from the NGX. We're always delighted to have an opportunity to talk about what we do at the NGX. So if you think about Islamic finance, I think it's always better to remove the lens of religion from it and just look at it as a financing tool for capital raise, as well as for corporates to be able to raise capital, governments to be able to raise capital, and also to bridge financial literacy or improve financial inclusion. It's largely a method of financing that takes away interest-bearing instruments, removes gambling, removes offsetting volatility in the instrument that is being held, and takes away unethical practices. So it's more in line with ethical best practices to ensure that the instrument itself is compliant with the Sharia principles, which obviously are in line with the IOS school standards in terms of the administration. So from a simple perspective, Islamic finance is just another alternative financing avenue for corporates, governments to be able to raise capital from a larger pool of capital within the domestic economy.
If we take a look at Islamic finance, Jude, I would like you to answer the other part of the question, because when we talk about Islamic finance, or as we're talking about it today, some people will be able to connect the dots and just think it's about Islamic banking. But like I mentioned earlier, are there other sectors that Islamic finance cover apart from banking?
Yes, I mean, largely the financial capital markets, in this case, it is the focus. But Islamic finance can also apply across different sectors. I mean, yesterday, we had an event with Islamic Development Bank Institute, and they were talking about corporates, corporates that hitherto one would have thought were not Islamic institutions would actually qualify on the equity side as much as the interest-bearing activity of those corporates are not exceeding the threshold as defined by the Sharia principle. So that could also apply. And we're seeing Islamic finance being utilized by predominantly Muslim countries But at the same time, it's also important to point out that it facilitates capital flow, because you see a lot of Islamic finance activities going on in the US, and the US is not essentially an Islamic country.
Yeah.
So it goes across different avenues for capital mobilization, deployment. It just has to agree with the Sharia component, which is the Sharia principles in line with ISO defined standards.
Since the introduction of, perhaps I would say that the introduction of Islamic banking to Nigeria further, expanded the conversation around Islamic finance. I don't know, I could be wrong, but I remember vividly under Emir Sanusi's leadership at the CBN, when the Central Bank of Nigeria at that time gave license to Jais Bank. That was, I think, 2011, 2012. It further expanded conversations around Islamic finance. So if you take a look at that time, from that time till now, how far have we done in terms of Islamic financial products? I know that Jais Bank is listed on the NGX, I think Lotus too, and perhaps one other, but those are the two coming to my mind now, And we've also seen the federal government taking advantage of Islamic finance, Islamic funding. The sukuk, you go around the country, you see some roads are being built or rehabilitated as a result of sukuk, which of course it's Islamic product. So how far have we gone from about 2011, 2012 to where we are right now? And what has also been the contribution of NGX, former Nigerian exchange, Nigerian Stock Exchange? Now you guys are NGX. What has been the contribution of your organization to the growth of Islamic finance in Nigeria?
Thank you. So Islamic finance has grown significantly. I mean, globally, it's a double-digit growth that we have seen. And like you mentioned earlier, depending on the agency, we do know that Fitch states that global industry size to be somewhere around 800 billion US. And so in Nigeria, the whole journey started in 2012, but in 2013, Osun State issued the first sukuk ijara that was used for schools reconstruction. That was about 10 plus billion that was raised from that activity. And like you pointed out, we just had one or two listed corporates, but now that has grown. We have about 9 sukuk entities that are listed on the NGX, and the market cap is well over 849 billion. If you look at what the SEC is targeting, it's targeting about 25% listed instruments to be Sharia compliant. They have a target of 50 listings with a market cap of 5 trillion by 2025. And we're really well on course. Obviously, there are challenges, and we do recognize the challenges, which is really around capacity, awareness within the domestic market. And so the event we have yesterday with the Islamic Development Institute is really part of the contribution of the NGX in helping corporates to understand all the various elements. It's not just sukuk, there are other areas of Islamic financial products that can be created to allow improved participation and capital raise from the market. So from the NGX perspective, we're really more or less in tune with the capital market plan, master plan that the SEC is driving, and sukuk is, and Islamic finance is a critical component of that. And that is why we're partnering with international organizations to just try and deepen the local knowledge, which we believe will help corporates and government. From the government side, we've really seen the government raise well over $1 trillion utilizing this product. And you talk about the roads that are being done by the use of the proceeds. And that is a good thing. The infrastructural gap within the domestic market is still largely financed from plain vanilla bonds, but we could do a lot more in that regard to be able to raise the capital required to bridge those financial gaps. So we'll continue along product development, creating more products, creating more avenues, and also trying to get more inclusion. As you're aware, we just recently launched in partnership with MTN, the USSD code star 5474 hash that really brings the retail clients more involved in the markets. With that, they can get pricing, market information, and they'll be able to really utilize that to be able to participate in offerings. And so we believe that in the long run, the retail investor participation in our market will also deepen, and that will also help drive financial inclusion, financial literacy, and all of these components. We believe technology will play a critical role, and the NGX will continue to use technology to drive our operations, drive market efficiency, market inclusiveness, and that's really what we are about.
So what was the partnership about with Islamic Development Bank Institute? I would really like to know where the partnership will be.
It's really more around capacity building. So the theme of the workshop is really around economic growth and also product development utilizing Islamic capital markets. So today, we believe that in partnering with Islamic Development Bank Institute, we'll be able to deepen knowledge of Islamic products, and so that corporates can become aware of the various areas that they can actually utilize. Some of the projects that they are doing today, utilizing plain vanilla bonds, can actually be done in a lot more efficient manner, utilizing Islamic finance. So that partnership will help deepen that local knowledge. And we had well over 100 corporates that were in attendance, just looking at the various financing options, various instruments that they can utilize to create and deepen their capital requirement for all the things that they are doing. The interesting thing that if you think about what is going on in the world globally, the key countries that are really leading in this area will be Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, and Malaysia. And they are doing quite a lot in raising capital for infrastructural development within those areas. Saudi Arabia, for instance, Aramco was able to raise $2.6 billion that they used in financing their refineries. And today in Nigeria, we're talking about raising capital for our refineries and all of that. We can actually use Islamic finance to do a whole lot more in that regard. The other area is really around financial inclusion. If you think about all the many people that are excluded from the financial markets, some because of ethical reasons, now with Islamic finance knowledge, they will see instruments that they can invest in that they agree with. And so that will also drive financial inclusion in the domestic economy. Also SMEs that are aware, because of the principle of Sharia, they should be able to participate in risk-taking, and they will be able to get funding. The government is really committed to the growth of the SMEs, and we think that they can actually leverage Islamic finance capital market to be able to raise the required capital to drive these SMEs and medium-scale enterprises, which we believe will help create more jobs, lead to more economic prosperity for the major youths that we have in Nigeria that are financially excluded at the moment.
I like that you talked about, Islamic finance hubs, and I'm wondering if Nigeria can be one of those hubs in Africa. Of course, we know places like Dubai. You just mentioned Saudi Arabia. In fact, Saudi Arabia houses the largest Islamic bank in the world. If I can remember the name, Al-Rajhi, if I'm not mistaken, the largest Islamic finance, the largest Islamic bank in the world. So you see, country is like, of course, Saudi Arabia, you have Dubai, you mentioned Malaysia earlier on. UK too is not doing badly. London is not doing badly in terms of Islamic finance. What will really make us a hub for Islamic finance perhaps in Africa? Do you think we could be on our way there, or if we do not take time, another country might just take over from us, even though we are the biggest economy and perhaps, as they always say, the biggest market? But now, after is the biggest market. Well,
to be honest, in terms of Islamic finance, as far as we can see from the data, Nigeria remains the hub. It's more or less the leading country from the issuance. If you think about the 800 billion sukuk markets globally, and Nigeria is around 1.2 2.6 billion. So that makes us really the hub for Africa at the moment. And with all the various commitments of the capital market policies, even from the center, the federal government, and all the work that SEC is doing to drive Islamic finance in Nigeria, also partnering with international partners to ensure that the rules are well curated to encourage greater participation. And if you think about the domestic PFAs, pension fund managers that we have, the asset allocation really allows a portion of those assets to be invested in Islamic products, which is really one of the sweet spots that Africa has, that Nigeria has in terms of its participation. And so there's a huge demand for Islamic products in Nigeria, which is why we're having all these partnerships to help encourage corporates to take advantage of the demand pool to create products that will allow investors to invest in these instruments. So Nigeria will continue to play a leading role on account of policy, on account of issuance. The DMO has raised well over ₦1 trillion just financing road projects in Nigeria. And I think they will continue to also leverage that market. When it started sometime in 2017, I think the